myself Vaibhav. In today's session of Visual JForex, I will be demonstrating to you the use of indicator block named ZigZag. This is an indicator which is utilized to determine the trend of the underlying instrument, and we will see how we can use this indicator block to design and develop the algorithmic setup on the Visual JForex platform. So here it is, this indicator included under the other classified indicators. We will now straight away head to the Visual JForex board developed by the Dukascopy Bank SA. You will find this indicator listed amongst the indicators in the other classification. So here is the zigzag right at the bottom. We have seen all these indicators so far. Now in today's session it is the turn of the zigzag indicator block. To initialize the system we will use the on tick as our start point. Any of the three can be utilized as the start point to initialize this algorithm. And coming to the zigzag indicators input parameters, we have to define 6 input parameters based on which we will be getting the output value, the zigzag value, which then can be compared to the earlier values to see if the zigzag line is on the rise or whether it is falling, and depending on its direction we can trade. If the zigzag values are on the rise, then that indicates the momentum is on the bullish side. If the zigzag values are falling, that indicates the momentum is on the bearish side. So we will now see on the JForex chart how this indicator works. This indicator is purely determined by the price action. We take the highest and the lowest value, that is the swing high and the swing low, over a given period of time. The depth parameter is defined for this purpose of determining the values and the given period of that. And then comes the standard deviation. The standard deviation is how far the value has moved away from the recent extreme value, whether it is swing high or the swing low. And we see the deviation parameter to see if there is any significant movement and if the trend change is warranted. We also have the step back period to see how in recent past, that is last couple of candles, how the price action has reacted. And many times what happens when the trend is in not fully formed scenario, when the momentum is strong and when we see the break on one side, but it is still not fully complete, or you can say the retracement has not really set in such scenarios like the ongoing situation, where we will see this zigzag line getting adjusted as this candle moves and as it closes. And if we see the next candle also opening and then going on the lower side, then we will see this line getting extended. So in such scenarios the step back parameter comes handy. Now, as I said, the underlying assumption is fairly simple. We simply compare how these zigzag values are moving. As you can see the case here, we are now in a position where we can see that the zigzag output values are on the decline, and in such instance we can think about getting involved for the short sell trade. When we see that the zigzag values are on the rise, then that is the point in time where we can think about getting involved for the long side trade. And you have to define the deviation accordingly, whether you want to catch the big moves or whether you want to catch the smaller moves. That depends a lot on how you are going to define the deviation parameter. And as I said, one of the crucial first input is the number of candles which will be taken into consideration for calculation of these swing highs and swing lows, which then will be joined to form these trend lines, which will give us the idea of the underlying momentum for the given instrument. So now we head back to the Visual JForex board, where we have this indicator block and we need to customize these parameters. So coming to the default instrument, if you want to work with the Euro USD, you don't have to change anything. If you want to design and develop the algorithm for any other indicator which is supported here, you can choose that indicator and you will be able to design and develop the algorithm for that particular instrument. For today's session, we will take Euro JPY as our default instrument. Then comes the question of the default period for the candlesticks of the given instrument. And as I have said many times, this is the parameter which needs to be determined while keeping in mind the time horizon for the trade. If you are looking for the intraday trades, then the lower time frames will do the job. If you are looking for the longer term horizon or medium term horizon, then I think the time frames like 4 hourly or daily or even weekly will serve the purpose better. So depending on the requirement, this parameter needs to be chosen and there is nothing specific about it. We can keep it as per our requirement. For today's session, we will use the 4 hourly as our time period for this indicator block. Then comes the look back period. Many times what happens when the trend line has not been fully finalized, in such scenarios we might get some misleading signals. So in case of the zigzag indicator, usually, which is what I prefer, but it's individual choice, but what I am saying is that if you use the shift value of say 10 hours or 12 hours, and if you then compare the that point in time zigzag value and the value again say 24 hours back from the current time, so you will have the 2 points in time where the time difference between the 2 points is like around 12 hours, and you will be able to compare the zigzag values whether the trend line is on the rise or whether the trend line is falling, and that will give you an idea of the momentum which is prevalent in the underlying instrument, and then you can do the comparison and try to trade with the trend, and also you can take the current output value and also see if there has been any significant deviation. If not, then you can simply rely on the pre-existing trend, and if you see there has been significant deviation after taking into consideration the zigzag value for the current candle, then you can I think sit on the sidelines or also can think about getting involved in the direction in which the trend has changed. And as I said earlier also, we have to define the external depth of this indicator. The depth is simply the number of candlesticks which will be taken into consideration while calculating the zigzag values, and more the number of candles, more depth where there will be, and we will be able to define the swing highs and swing lows over that period of time. So this indicator parameter is of high importance and we can customize it as per our requirement. Here I will explain to you briefly how these values, this formation changes as we change this depth parameter. Say for example, if we make it 120, all these shorter time moves have vanished and one larger wave is now visible, which is pointing to the continuous bearishness in the underlying instrument. Earlier also we had this bullish momentum holding well, and eventually we saw the Euro USD getting closer to the 1.19 zone, and then after this steep decline the fortune seems to have reversed for the Euro USD. So this is the one of the parameters, the depth, and we can always change all the three parameters as per our requirement. Then comes the question of the deviation, how much deviation you want, which is going to confirm the change in trend. If you use the deviation of 5, then you will have to wait for 5 standard deviation in underlying instrument before the new trend line, new line for the zigzag indicator is plotted. Then comes the back step. Usually to keep the fluctuations low, we use this back step uh, where we retrieve the data back in time, not the current data, and these instruments input parameters can also be customized, and depending on how we customize this, we will have the difference creeping up in the plotting. So now this is the Euro USD's 10 minute chart, and the input parameters have been changed for the zigzag indicator. And if I again restore it to 3, we will see a lot more difference in the plotting of this zigzag indicator. So this is how the system works, and we have to be cautious. We have to try and see if we can figure out the optimum trade setup, which will help us in finding the underlying instrument trend, and then we will be able to trade with the trend. So this is how these indicators input parameters can be customized to work in our benefit. Also for these indicator, we have to be careful on which side the calculation is being done, whether it is on the bid side or on the ask side, and also comes the question of the applied price. When I talked about the extreme prices, the highest and the lowest, if we use the applied price to be the close price, then you will have the closing high and the closing low being taken for consideration of the plotting of these indicator. If we change applied price and use any other particular price, then that price swing extremes will be taken into consideration while calculating these parameter of the zigzag. So that's it from my side for today's session. If any of you have any query or any idea to share, you can write it in the comment section, and I would be more than happy to take the discussion forward. Thank you all for joining in. Goodbye.